So, thank you. So first, I want to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded. One of the benefits of having classes on Zoom is that it's very easy to record them, and then we can share them with people later. If you miss a class session that you want to see, we can send you the link, and we can also share them with our special guests today as well. So my name is Megan Wilden. I'm delighted to be the Executive Director of OLLI, the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at Berkshire Community College. And I'm very excited about this class today, The Other Side of the Berkshires. We did a similar version of it a couple of years ago, where we actually had physical visits to different social service nonprofits throughout Berkshire County. It was extremely well received, and I'm sorry we can't make those visits this time, but we are very fortunate to have the directors of many of the most impactful nonprofits in the Berkshires with us today, as well as Liana Toscanini, a one-woman fireball tornado of competence and initiative. But Steve will introduce her officially. That's just my phrase. And meanwhile, I want to introduce Steve Tobin. He is a member of the OLLI Board of Directors and of our development committee. And he is the co-founder with Lenny Tabbs of this new second summer semester that we have. So he is the proud papa of it, and he will be introducing Liana. So thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Megan. I want to introduce Lilliana Toscanini. And yes, if you're going to ask the question, her great-grandfather is Arturo Toscanini. I asked her before I had asked for myself. Anyhow, Lilliana founded the nonprofit Center of the Berkshires in 2016. She had spent many years as a community organizer and development and marketing director. She's recipient of a number of awards, and her marketing background has proven useful in the Berkshires as it did in New York City. She's past president of Sandus Field Arts Center and secretary of the Southern Berkshire Chamber of Commerce. She currently serves on the board of the Massachusetts Nonprofit Network. And Lilliana, we thank you for coming today and doing this for us. We appreciate it very much.
You are welcome. I'm very happy to be here, actually. I know I've told Megan, but I'll tell all of you, I love OLLI, and I can't wait until I'm not working full time so I can take advantage of all these classes. I love the whole concept. So I'm excited to be here today because in my busy, crazy day, I don't often get to spend so much time with our nonprofit leaders. And of course, I respect and admire them all. They're amazingly hardworking and dedicated, and you can learn a lot when you speak to them. And of course, we're not meeting for coffee anymore. So this is a lovely opportunity for me personally, and also I hope for all of you, just to sit and chat and learn more about what's going on behind the scenes, particularly now. Things are pretty crazy and surreal. So I'm excited just to have this opportunity. Alana, I know and speak to often, but Colleen and I have never sat down and spoken at length. So I'm super pleased about that. And I'll be as interested to hear what she has to say as everyone else attending. So let's get to it. We're going to start with volunteers in medicine today with Alana Steinhauer, who's the executive director and has been there for several years now. It's probably more like 10, and I don't even know because 7 years flew by. But I would like to, yes, and we will leave time, I should mention that at the end, for Q&A. So people can ask questions using the chat function, and we will pick them up and answer as many as we can in the time that we have. So we're going to be spending about 35 minutes with each organization today. This series, almost every organization is doing critical work in our county. And every single executive director I asked to join us was able to. We coordinated it all out. So thank you, all of you, some of whom are maybe on the line today, for just making time to speak to me and to the folks at OLLI. So Alana, tell us just intro style a little bit about volunteers in medicine and yourself, and then we can sort of get into what kind of programs you're offering now and how COVID-19 is affecting everything that you do, and then we'll move on from there.
Great. Thanks, Liana and Megan and Stephen and the whole Ollie team. And I see some names I recognize. I can't see any faces, but for all those VIM volunteers, hi. So my name's Ilana Steinhauer. I have been at Volunteers in Medicine since January of 2014. I came here to become the Director of Clinical Services here. I am a nurse practitioner, so I moved from Boston back to the Berkshires. And when I say back, my relationship with the Berkshires was through a summer camp. My mom used to run a kitchen here for since I was 6 months old. So I had grown up coming here every summer and then lived here right after college. Actually was an intern at Volunteers in Medicine, went to Boston, became a nurse practitioner and worked in Boston, and then had twins and decided to come back here. So I came back here in 2014 and then became the executive director of Volunteers in Medicine a few years later. So for those of you who do not know, Volunteers in Medicine is a free healthcare facility that provides care for people who are uninsured or underinsured in the Berkshire region. And our name Volunteers in Medicine is because we are based on a model that if you can mobilize volunteers in your community to provide services, you're then able to provide those services at a fraction of a cost and therefore free for the people who need them most. So we started in about 2004. It actually was an idea that came out of a workshop at Berkshire Taconic, and one of our board members who is still on our board was leading a group there, and there was a group of people who realized that there was a lack of healthcare for many people in the Berkshires. This was before universal healthcare. So Harvard School of Public Health did a needs assessment survey in Berkshire County, and they identified the need. So 2004, we opened and with primary care with the idea of opening dental very quickly after that. So we provide care at this point. We provide full primary care, so internal medicine. We have a full dental program. We provide behavioral health, nutrition, optometry, integrative pain management, so acupuncture, massage. We do case management. And then we have specialists like orthopedists, cardiologists, GI specialists, ENT, all of these things that all take place within our walls. We have about 160 volunteers. 108 of those volunteers are engaged monthly and 60 are clinical. And then we have a staff of about 12. So what that means is we're taking care of a very specific population in the Berkshires. So people who are uninsured or underinsured. People wonder, oh, who's going to be uninsured? Who's underinsured? What does that mean? The underinsured is pretty clear for us. Underinsured at this point means people who might have dental insurance, but don't have, who might have medical insurance, but don't have dental insurance. And also it means, there's certain services that we don't have in Berkshire County for a certain population. So specifically behavioral health, we provide behavioral health in Spanish and Portuguese and French. This is something that doesn't exist very widely in our community. So that's another area where we consider people underinsured. But otherwise, the majority of our patients who come here are uninsured. So they're uninsured for a variety of reasons. It could be people who've just moved here. It could be people who are transitioning jobs. It could be people right now who've lost their job and who have then lost their insurance. It could be people who don't qualify for insurance. There's a whole lot of reasons why people are uninsured. And the statistic in Berkshire County is about 20% of our population between the ages of 19 to 64 are without insurance for part of the year. And so our goal is if you can be insured, we get you insured and we get you hooked into the system. And if you are uninsured, we're here to make sure that you're taken care of. That is it in a nutshell. You're muted.
I was going to say, I think you just had a cup of iced coffee. That's what I'm thinking.
I'm always like this.
Okay. So I remember someone I knew, yes, didn't have insurance, had an injury, went to VIM and got incredible medical care, like really outstanding medical care. And that's when VIM really got on my radar. I thought certainly that volunteers in medicine was a wonderful idea. And I was actually in that workshop where volunteers in medicine, where Matt Mandel talked to Marion Simon and said, we have this idea, or I have this idea. And she said, oh, you should talk to my husband. I was actually in that particular workshop at the time. So I like to say I was there when VIM was born. But so, I mean, VIM has grown a lot. Talk to us a little bit about the kind of growth that is now happening as a result of the pandemic. Certainly you had to pivot, and I'd like to hear a little bit about that, about how you managed to address issues given that it's hard to see people, at least in the beginning, and then what has changed for VIM. Are you getting more people in? Just how is COVID-19 affecting VIM overall?
So just quickly before I do COVID, the response to the growth and kind of what that's looked like and why. And so, you know, like 18 Degrees, and I'm also excited to listen, is, you know, VIM is based on the model of patient-centered care. So from the beginning, from that meeting, the goal was, how do you provide healthcare? What does that mean? What does healthcare look like? And so VIM has always been extremely quick to pivot and to address needs that are seen in the community and add services or adjust our care model to make sure that we're meeting needs. And so we've seen over the past few years, especially, a huge increase in patient demand. And we thought 2005, when universal healthcare, you know, happened, they thought, are we going to have to shut our doors? Is everyone going to have insurance? We've actually not seen that. We've seen an uptick in need. And I think it's partly because the community is seeing an increased uninsured population, but also because the care model that we're providing is one that's attracting people to seek healthcare when they normally maybe didn't seek it in the past. And so to have a patient-centered model where you walk in and you're looked at as a person, and we can individualize what that care looks like. So if you've broken an arm, but you can, you know, that looks very different if it's an acute thing than if you're coming in with diabetes or pregnant or, you know, domestic violence. So being able to adjust our care model and do these individual approach has really, I think, led to a lot of the growth. So yeah, we've been growing pretty exponentially. We've had between a 15 and 20% growth of patients yearly for the past 3 to 4 years. When I started in 2014, we had about 400 and something patients, and we're close to 1,000 at this point. So it's been a pretty big growth. COVID, like every other place, has kind of put every operation, you know, we've had to relook at everything. So we are a volunteer organization, and our volunteers are very similar to the Ollie crowd. Many of them are retired and puts them at a higher risk. And so we all of a sudden had a model where we have volunteers providing most of our care, and now we couldn't bring volunteers into the clinic. So we quickly adopted telehealth, just like you guys are on Zoom. Our behavioral health team, our medical team, were easily able to switch into a telehealth model. And then, you know, our other programs, mindfulness, we were able to do Zoom, you know, nutrition, you know, we were able to send out videos and engage that way. And then our dental program had to shift to just seeing emergencies. And that was a state regulation that came out, and also safety of our providers. So, you know, we love our patients in the office. So the shift was depressing for most of us, but it was a shift that had to happen, and it was a successful shift. We were open the entire time. We had staff in the building at all times. So we were always seeing patients who needed care. Our goal was to keep people out of the emergency room. So abdominal pain, you know, any symptoms that, you know, could lead to an emergency room visit, we saw in the office. So we never stopped seeing patients. And then we also really pivoted to make sure that we were addressing all of the other needs of the patients. So healthcare to us is clinical, you know, we're volunteers in medicine, but in order to provide true healthcare, you need to be focusing on housing and heating and food security and all of those things. So we were lucky enough to already have a program, a community health worker and a social determinants of health program in place, and we were able to expand that quickly and continue to provide needs. So at this point, we are still seeing more people. We're seeing people who got stuck here because of COVID. We're seeing people who've lost their jobs. Those are the two increases that we're seeing at this point. We are reopened almost fully in terms of our medical team at this point. Our dental team is expanded back, so we are seeing more patients in office. And we're still doing a hybrid of some people are telehealth and then some stuff is in office.
So we have one question that we might as well answer. Comparing the Berkshires uninsured rate with Massachusetts and then the rest of the country, and also are all your services free for the uninsured?
So to clarify, the 20%, just to make sure I'm clear, it's ages 19 to 64, which is our major demographic. So that takes out Medicare and children, and most people over the age of 65 and under the age of 19 are insured. Interestingly, if you look at the statistics of overall, Great Barrington is one of the highest uninsured rates in Massachusetts. Berkshire County has always had a pretty high uninsured rate compared to the rest of the state, and that's because of what kind of economy we have here. Most people are working, you know, restaurants, they're working multiple jobs, landscaping, some of it's on the table, some of it's off, some of it's part-time, some of it's almost full-time, but they don't get insurance. And so people are in and out of jobs. And so we've always had a pretty high uninsured rate. And yes, all of our services are free.
Yeah, it's really an incredible thing. And just so that people know, volunteers in medicine, there are other volunteers in medicine across the country. Do you know how many there are and how volunteers in medicine Berkshires may differ? I don't know if you customized your model at all.
So Volunteers in Medicine is an idea and a mission that is throughout the United States. There are about 88 other Volunteers in Medicine sites. The only similarity is the mission that we will provide free care for people who are uninsured, with volunteers as our focus of care providers. So some are open half a day a week, some are open, you know, in Las Vegas, they have, I think, 50,000 clients. But we're all, you know, we all kind of have the same mission. We all operate very, very differently.
So tell me a little bit about the VIM volunteer. I'm assuming it's like a retired doctor, right? Or somebody in the healthcare industry.
I think, you know, this is, I think, one of the things that makes VIM pretty special. And, you know, what we're doing for our clients is, you know, it's great to do, but what we can do for volunteers is also just as great. So, you know, we have volunteers that are clinicians, we have dentists, we have front desk, we have drivers, we have
It looks like Ilana's frozen, yeah? Is that what you guys are seeing? Ilana, if you can hear us, you may want to reboot. Oh, there she is. There she goes.
Did I freeze?
Yeah, you're
You're
back.
Broadband.
Yeah. In the Berkshires.
So, you know, we provide volunteer opportunities, all different types. Our new biggest volunteer opportunity was our driving program. That's one opportunity, you know, one thing that has not restarted at this point. We have interpreters, we have behavioral health, dentists, everything you can imagine. One of the things about it that's so, I think, special is that it creates its own community. So like Ollie, where you have your own community, you know, we create another community in here for our volunteers. So people who are, you know, who've lived here their whole lives, or who are moving here for the first time, or young students or college kids get to come in here and have an experience where you have a multi-generational interactions. You're all focused on the same mission, and you really start to find a community. And, you know, we hear from a lot of people, it's the best job they've ever had. And we have some amazing volunteers, and we spend a lot of time making sure that this is a place that volunteers want to be, and that we can retain our volunteer group of people, because that's what we need to survive. And that's how we provide our services for free. If if we don't have volunteers, we can't do what we do.
So I'm curious, tell me a little bit more about the volunteer community. Do people make friends this way and then hang out? I mean, I noticed that at Community Access to the Arts, where I worked for a number of years, the folks that volunteered in Cata Direct, which was the crafts workshop, became amazing friends and have dinner together all the time. And it's what happens when you're working closely and have found a sort of another vocation as a volunteer. I'm just wondering if the same thing happens with VIM volunteers as well.
Exactly the same thing. And we, make it a point to make sure we have volunteer gatherings for people to meet. But what seems to happen is our volunteers oftentimes have their schedule, and so they become closer with people who are, at their scheduled times. We have volunteers who, especially our drivers, who form relationships with other people in the community who they drive back and forth, week after week, and they get to introduce them, each other to different parts of the community as well, which is really special. But, our volunteer party, I think, is the best party of the year, better than any gala. And I think our volunteers love it because you get to be in a room with people who are really all there for the same reason and just have huge hearts and are in the Berkshires, loving living here and really wanting to be part of the community.
Well, it's so lovely to be able to use volunteers in that way, in such a way that makes so much impact. So you touched upon, the gala, right? Tell us how VIM is doing financially, if you don't mind sharing with us what's happening in that regard. What do you need? Are you having a gala, a virtual gala? What's happening now as you think about all your increased services and how much more resources you might need?
So Volunteers in Medicine is totally privately funded. So we rely on individual donations, foundations, and then business support. So we are, our budget each year is about $1 million, about $1.1 million. And that's, if you think about how many patients we have, that's equivalent to about $1,000 per patient for an entire year of medical care, dental care, behavioral health, case management. I mean, it's, a super, super low, super cheap kind of model because of the volunteer model that we use. So we are always worried about finances, like every nonprofit in the Berkshires, pretty much. We have been around since 2004, and we work extremely hard to engage donors, and to not engage donors because we want to make a lot of money, but to engage donors because we are seeing an increased demand, and we want to ensure that we're able to meet the need of the community. So COVID's been an interesting time. There's been a lot of COVID response in terms of people wanting to help for COVID. The complication of that is that COVID is not operating money. COVID money is oftentimes, money to, that passes through. So maybe it's patient support, which is extremely important, or maybe it's to buy protective equipment or, things such as that, but it doesn't really go towards the operating budget. So I think just like all nonprofits who are going into a summer season, we are not having a gala. We don't feel like this is the time when we need to focus on operations and COVID and the demand to reinvent how we do an online gala. It's not our specialty. So we're not doing a gala. We are relying on people's donations and the hope that our mission is enough to continue to bring in the funding. So we don't know what 6 months is going to look like. If tomorrow we have to put in a huge, filtration system that, we're kind of constantly looking at what are all the scenarios and what are our options and how are we going to ensure that we're able to provide. But we look at it every day, and we're confident that we have a good donor base, and we are always looking for new donors.
So we actually have a question about revenue in the Q&A box. So that's the other place you can ask a question besides chat. But Carl Schuster was wondering what the breakdown is in terms of revenue that comes in, donations versus government support. I don't think there are any patient payments unless there are voluntary payment for services, but can you give us a little bit of an idea of how much you depend on one type of donation or another?
And I have Gail here, who's our development director, so she'll jump in if I mess up any of this. But we do not take any government support, so it is all private donations. About 20% is our board. We do, we have a box out there if patients want to make a donation, but that's, a pretty small percentage. The rest of it is events, which is about 20%, I think, at this point, and then individuals and foundations as well as grants.
So we have a question about VIM's impact in the community. Other than the person that I knew that got medical care and as a result found out they had diabetes, which was then treated, and diabetes comes with obviously a host of complications, and it was all attended to by volunteers in medicine. So I was very impressed. I think generally I'm super proud to live in a community that has volunteer medical care. I mean, that doesn't exist everywhere. As you said, it's only 88. There are only 88 VIMs in the country. But I think, as knowing what I know from attending certain meetings and listening to Ilana, who has a lot of really good ideas and thoughtful solutions to problems that extend beyond VIM. I know that everyone in the medical world and everyone serving the underserved is trying to make sure there are no closed doors, so that wherever you go for help with one thing, those people can then help you get the other things you need as well. For example, a ride to your doctor's appointment or whatever it is. But I think it would be interesting to hear a little bit more, Ilana. I think that you've had an impact in that sphere of helping people. Let's take the population of immigrants, let's say. When they walk in and they need some medical care, it's not just medical care that you're giving. There are a host of other connections that you're making for people. And I think that's where the real impact is. It's this sort of, I don't know, you've got a term for it in your world, but tell us a little bit about how VIM makes connections for people that are way beyond what's happening in your four walls.
So yeah, I mean, my biggest passion outside of VIM and with VIM is, what does it mean to have a community like the Berkshires where you can walk in anywhere and you can be, referred to and case managed throughout, from agency to agency. So we work extremely closely with a group of agencies, and whether it's Construct, which is the housing in Great Barrington, or 18 Degrees, or Elizabeth Freeman, or BCAC, all of these agencies throughout the county, and work with what we call a partnership. And our goal is, what would it look like to have one system? So one computer system, one way in which we are all communicating together and we're all able to help the clients, so we're not siloing. So if somebody came in and saw Colleen's staff at 18 Degrees and they happened to be one of our patients, and they started to refer them to housing and food and and then that person came into us, what would it look like if we could already see the work that 18 Degrees was doing, and that we could work together to ensure that that person has everything they need. And so, what we find is, we have a huge immigrant population that we serve here, and it's an area in the Berkshires that really, it's a growing population. It's a new type, where Pittsfield always had an immigrant population. This is the immigrant population is shifting a little bit. And so what does it look like to move into the Berkshires and get your kid enrolled in school? It's not that easy to do, to figure out how you enroll your kid in school. How do you call the bus? How do you get them onto school, onto food programs, and, all of those things? How do you make sure there's housing? How do you make sure, what does that look like? So our goal and what we do for our patients is make it as easy as possible to link into what other agencies are doing, give them the resources they need, and decrease duplication and work together as a community.
So tell us about one of the things that came out of that, I think, was the transportation issue, right? Which is integral to all these things. And you developed a whole kind of ride program, and which I understand is not operating now for obvious reasons. But tell us a little bit about that, because that is a way that in the future, when we have a vaccine, that people could get involved. And I imagine that that's fun. I remember driving people as a volunteer, and you know, you're in a car, you get to know them really well. So tell us a little bit about that.
So we all know transportation in the Berkshires is kind of non-existent, and to get from Pittsfield to Great Barrington, or even Lee to Great Barrington, or wherever, it can take an hour and a half sometimes, and different hours. So we did what we do with all of our other programs. We kind of assessed the need, and then we figured how can we use volunteers. So we had a volunteer driving program prior. It stopped, and then we really worked with the American Cancer Society that does this as well, and used their model to figure out how can we make sure that we are able to do this. So we provide about 1,000 rides a year. And they can be just within the Berkshires. We have some volunteers that will bring patients all the way to Boston for surgeries and drive them back. We have, but in general, it's been really just a great addition to our services. It's allowing our patients to have easier access to services, and also allowing for our volunteers to have really nice relationships with our patients. And so, we talk about telehealth, telehealth is great because you've now kind of decreased the need to come in. And I know people are interested in, telehealth and how's it going to go forward. It's good. It increases access, especially for behavioral health. But it is it's not face-to-face. You're not touching the patient. You're not with the patient. You can't, there's something you lose. And so it's been super helpful when we can't have our drivers back in, but we cannot wait for when we can restart that program.
So we have a question. Do behavioral health providers, and I imagine this may apply to other healthcare providers as well, now retired with an expired license in another state, have to have an active Massachusetts license to be a volunteer?
So if you want to be a clinical volunteer, you do have to have an active license in Massachusetts. And unfortunately, Massachusetts it's extremely difficult to reinstate an expired license from another state into Massachusetts. We do require active licenses because we are a full medical facility, and therefore also we provide malpractice insurance through a free program, but you do need to have an active license. But that being said, we do have a lot of clinicians who were doing, nurses or, psychologists who come in and volunteer in a different way and find a different way to engage and still have patient contact.
Interesting. Let's see. I am getting questions in two different places, but I do think that we've answered all of them, unless there's another one in the Q&A. Yes, there is. Okay. You Ollie kids are confusing me. So Bob, one of the Ollie folks I actually know, in what ways does VIM coordinate with other parties or organizations in the Berkshires? So we talked about that kind of no closed door thing where people who need all kinds of services can go to any one of these service providers in the Berkshires and get information about all the other ones. But I know that there are other things that you've, other partners that you've engaged, other programs that you've created as solutions to some of the issues that we have here in the Berkshires.
Yes, I think, the two other areas. So obviously when we think about medical and what that looks like, so we can't do everything inside VIM. So we work extremely closely with other agencies, medical agencies around as well. So specifically Fairview and Berkshire Health Systems. And so Massachusetts does have what's called a health safety net fund. And what this fund is it's basically profits that other that the big hospitals in Boston had, and they kind of paid into this pot. Many years ago, it used to be called the Free Care Fund. And so if we have a patient that comes in and they have, a cancer diagnosis or something, they need a mammogram, some preventative care, the hospital is able to actually see those patients and bill that fund and still get some reimbursement for certain procedures. So what that allows us to do is really ensure that the care we're providing is equal to care that someone would get outside of this office. And then the second piece is, what does it mean to have health? What does good health look like? And we know the lived environment, like we've talked about, is extremely important. We're super lucky in the Berkshires to have the arts organizations that we have. So we've been lucky that they get grants to integrate with the community as well. And we've really been focusing specifically with our immigrant population about what does it mean to, how do we engage a community that is has been extremely isolated in with this arts community that we have? What does it look like to have people going to Jacob's Pillow, to going to Tanglewood or Berkshire Pulse? What does it look like to dance together, to go to the Mahawi and see music and to get to spend time together outside of a medical office? And how does that actually transform how we care for our patients and also transform how the patients care for themselves, their families? How does it bring back, a sense of self and just joy to their lives? So we really are looking at how do we continue that? What does that look like? What does it look like for our arts community to really engage with a community that, and not just immigrants, can be anybody who just would not normally access those services. So that's been extremely fun. And I look forward to seeing where that goes in the future once they reopen.
That reminds me that there are some amazing stories, I'm sure, of individuals who have, for whom VIM has really enhanced their lives. Do you have any particular sort of favorite stories that you tell that sort of illustrate the impact of VIM on an individual's life here in the Berkshires? I mean, it certainly can't be easy to be an immigrant. It can't be easy to be uninsured. There are lots of things, and I think that of all the things that could explain the impact, sometimes it's the individual stories. So I'm just curious, without naming names, if you could share one or two with us.
I'll just bring two recent stories because we are in this and we just talked about it today. So, we had a woman come in right at the start of, March 6th, right at the start when the pandemic was just starting to hit, who 67-year-old woman who was uninsured, who felt a breast lump. And so nobody ever wants to feel breast lump, especially when you've had a normal mammogram 6 months before. So what would normally happen in a place with no free clinic, probably she would let it wait, but she was able to feel that breast lump and she came into the office. She was able to be seen that day. We have a whole women's health program as well. And so that we had a nurse midwife here and had an exam. She was able to get an ultrasound and a mammogram through the hospital, through that fund that we had talked with. We were able to quickly see that the mass wasn't what it should be. She had a biopsy, she had a specialist appointment, she had a pre-op at VIM, and 6 weeks into the pandemic, she not only had the lump removed and was able to start on some chemotherapy, she was also able to work with our volunteers to ensure that her rent was paid, that her family had the food they need, and that her diabetes remained controlled throughout the whole thing. We had another family who, both parents got COVID during the pandemic, and they were two young parents with two young kids. And I know Colleen can imagine that when you have parents at home with a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old, and the parents are feeling as sick as they can feel, our first concern is what's going to happen, how are the kids, what's going on? And so VIM was able to provide the medical care for the families, but also we were able to call our rural health network, Deb Phillips, and say, hey, we can order some food from Taft's. Do you mind picking it up from Taft's and bringing it to VIM? She was able to get food to VIM. Then one of our staff was able to drop it off at the house. The kids had food. parents got better. We were able to help cover the rent. And actually, we just got pictures because we got 2 scholarships for those kids to go to summer camp. So, you know, I think we think, oh, it's just medical care, but the medical care, you know, the medical care is as important as everything else. And looking at what is it that we need to be doing. I see that John Galt's on the list, and, you know, he is key in our optometry program. What does it mean when you can't see and you've never had your eyes looked at? And we've had so many patients that come in and all of a sudden they put on, you know, new lens, they put on glasses, and they put on a special contact, and patients who didn't even realize they couldn't see can now see, or people who come in with dental pain and or working, you know, at a cash register at Big Y or, you know, any of the local places and don't want to smile, and they can come in and have their teeth, you know, cleaned and fixed, and then can go back to work, and the sense of self that it provides. And you know, it's volunteers doing this. It's, you know, volunteers get to directly impact what is happening in our community, and I think it's really powerful.
That is pretty powerful, but you also need cash. I know that when COVID hit, there were these issues of people not being able to afford rent and other things. And I know that you either had a fund for that or started a fund for that kind of extra emergency care that needed to happen for the people that come to VIM. Is that still ongoing?
Yeah, so, you know, we always have had this fund. Berkshire Taconic has a fund called Neighbor to Neighbor, which is a fund that they've had. Usually we get about $5,000 a year, and it's to be used for unexpected expenses for patients. You know, since COVID started, we've had donation, you know, we've given about $120,000 of cash assistance, and are about to, there's about 75,000 more that's about to be given out for childcare. This is all what we call pass-through funding. So this is not our operating funding. This is funding that's coming from, you know, these emergency COVID funds like mass COVID. Specifically, most of it's coming through Berkshire Taconic and from these funds. And what happens is they provide the funds, and then we are able to distribute the funds. So we have about 12, we have 10 volunteers and 2 staff who for the past 3 months have been ensuring that people have access to the food pantries, to the school lunches, to housing through Construct. And then when there's still this leftover need, using the funds to help provide assistance for that.
So that's a really important thing that I actually hadn't thought about as much, but just that pass-through role, because you have direct contact with people who need invariably lots of different services, and the fact that you can make that happen, which requires staff, it requires a coordination, but that's another way that VIM impacts the community. Sometimes, you know, we wonder who's out there that needs our help, and we don't know how to reach those people, but you do. So that's a really great role that you play in addition to all the other things that you do. So just to wrap up here, share with us a little bit about what it's like to be an executive director of a nonprofit in the Berkshires during a pandemic, taking into account that obviously VIM's, you couldn't work at home, right? So there wasn't any of that. Your pivot was different from other people's, but tell me what the last few months have been like for you as a nonprofit leader in our community.
It has been, we've probably gotten more education in the past 3 months about how to be executive directors than most executive directors get throughout their whole career. So in some ways, you know, what a great time to learn and to, you know, get to be thoughtful and creative and, you know, really think about what we're doing and how we're moving forward and what our ideal looks like and how do we get to that ideal. You know, it's been exhausting, and we are just extremely grateful for our staff and our volunteers because of their commitment. I haven't had a vacation yet, as most nonprofit executives have not yet. But we're getting to a point where I think people are able to start to breathe and to start to think about where we're going in the next 6 months, where we're going in the next year, and how do you make decisions when no one knows the answer. And so, you know, constant problem solving technique, you know, every day is the same loop, or every week. And I think the key is, how do you remain motivated and remain mission focused and ensure that the staff don't burn out and that the patients are getting what they need. So, and I have a great husband. I have to say, like, I have 7-year-old twin boys, and, you know, I've been out of the house since this started. So you know, I have to say, in an area where there is no childcare, this would be nearly impossible, in my opinion, to do without, you know, another person, whether it's a family member or a friend, being there. And I think that is a huge vulnerability we have in the Berkshires.
Yes, that's true. That's a good point. And I know lots of people are struggling with that. You also have, tell me how many people are on your board?
About 16 to 20.
Yeah. So have they been called upon? You know, boards are wonderful in crises, because sometimes, as we all know, board members are either more engaged or less engaged, depending on what's going on. But when there's a crisis, board members really do jump in. I've seen my own board go from reading reports to actively leading programs. And it was so wonderful to see. And I was so grateful for that help, because I couldn't have done it all myself either. So tell me about what it's like to be a VIM board member. I know they're pretty active and engaged, as far as I remember.
Yeah, so we have a great board. They're always engaged. We just had our annual meeting today, and what I said after was, you can tell our board has been more engaged recently than in prior years, because we didn't need to spend so much time talking about the happenings of the clinic. They already knew what was happening. We've been meeting one-on-one. We've been meeting in small groups. We have task force set up. You know, I think this is an important time for everybody to feel engaged with something. And I think our board, to, you know, have the commitment to our mission, they have really stepped up and supported staff in the way we needed it, by letting us actually do, you know, run the operations and not getting too involved, but also being there when we had things to bring up and different ideas to kind of run through. It's an exciting time, I think, in some ways, because I think this, you know, as horrible as this is, you know, people are starting to identify issues that we've been seeing for a long time, and starting to talk about it. And, you know, we have to stay optimistic that we're going to see some changes that we've needed for a long time. And then we have to be optimistic that the good things that we had will come back.
Thank you. That's a great way to end this, unless there's anything you want to say or any other questions. And yes, childcare is a really good segue to our next guest. Ilana, thank you very, very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate it. So Colleen, this will be our very first conversation besides seeing each other at various events. And you have been at 18 Degrees for, I think you just told me it's already 3 years have passed, and I didn't realize it, but yeah, so you've been in the trenches now. Tell us first what 18 Degrees is. I know it has a former name, and I'm so used to saying 18 Degrees now, I've sort of forgotten about it. But tell us what 18 Degrees is, and then a little bit about yourself and how you came to be there.
Certainly. First, thank you for having me, Liana, and to Ollie, and my admiration to my colleagues at VIM. So at 18 Degrees, we are a private community-based social services provider, and we promote the strength and well-being of children, youth, individuals, and families to build better communities in 4 core areas: early education and care, foster care and adoption, child and family well-being, and youth development. And our mission is every child in a family, every family in a community. And for us, family is however you define family and whatever family feels like to you. You're quite right. We changed our name about a year ago, and with very, very good reason. And as a result of our strategic planning process, which we undertook in my first year here, and actually when I was in the interview process for my current role as president and CEO of 18 Degrees, I told the board that if they hired me, we were going to be doing a strategic plan in my first year, and we were of one accord on that. So that was great. And so 18 Degrees, which is like the funnest fact ever, 18 degrees is where the sun stands, just below the horizon at daybreak. And for us, that speaks to our mission. It speaks to our value of the light that is inside every individual. It speaks to the fresh promise of a new day, and the fact that we may be here one day, but the next day we can be somewhere else and we can choose something else. And our work is about working with people to help them attain and support them in attaining and facilitate and whatever else we can think of in attaining what it is they want for themselves. Our former name was Berkshire Children and Families, and we drop-kicked that one because one, we're not only in the Berkshires, we are throughout Western Massachusetts. Our name, Children and Families, did not convey to people that you don't have to be in a family unit. And by the way, if you have ever asked a teen who is like 14 years old, if they are a child, well, you'd get your feelings hurt. And so folks weren't necessarily seeing themselves listed in the labeling of our name. And our acronym was BCF, which people misheard as DCF, which is the Department of Children and Families. And finally, the Berkshires loves to name everything Berkshire something, something, something. And so we really, as part of our strategic planning process, identified that these were actually barriers to people choosing us or being referred to us, and people thinking that they knew us, when in fact, maybe they knew us 10 years ago or even 50 years ago. You know, we're over 130 years old, so we've been around a minute or two. And so we chose an unconventional name on purpose because we feel that our job, and it is part of our vision, is to stand out in order to stand up for the people that we serve. You're muted. You're telling me something though.
Thank you. Most because I don't want people to hear my squeaky office chair. The name 18 Degrees has actually grown on me quite a bit. And I like the kind of aspirational nature of it. And you're right, when we list our nonprofit center members, there's a whole lot of Berkshire somethings. Yes, you're not going to be under B. In fact, 18 Degrees comes up first when you alphabetize a list of the over 1,000 nonprofits in Berkshire County. 18 Degrees, because it has a 1 in front of it, comes up first. So
that was not lost on us. But it happened to go. It happened to go. Yeah.
So how many people currently work at 18 Degrees? How big is this organization, both in terms of number of people who work there and annual budget.
Sure. So 18 Degrees serves about 5,000 people annually. And we work intensively with people. So this is not like, you know, sort of in the door and out the door kind of work that we're doing. Our work is very much relationally based and ongoing. Our staff is about 150 people. We are at 9 sites across Western Massachusetts. And so we have our main office here in the Berkshires. We have another office in West Springfield. We have programming at Redfield House and programming at West Main Connection, which is up in North Adams, right there behind City Hall. And we are also embedded in the schools of Conti and Morningside and for Brayton Elementary up in North Adams. And we are embedded in the DCF offices in Greenfield and here in Pittsfield. And wait, there's one more. And we are also embedded at Treehouse, which is a particular model of re-envisioning foster care.
So we have a question here. Are you an adoption and foster care agency? So this is about language and also clarifying a little bit more about what 18 Degrees about, and we'll get into that, some of the programs that you offer.
Sure. So 18 Degrees provides a range of services. And so everything, again, from early education and care, before and after school care. Yes, we are an agency that recruits foster parents, assesses them, gets them trained and placed, and that then works to match children with appropriate foster families. And then we provide ongoing weekly, sometimes daily support, 24/7 support to those foster families. Yes, we do indeed do the work of adoption, and really the work of adoption, there are typically at least 2 years, and can be even more, lead work before the adoption even occurs. And so just all of that finding and vetting of families and children, and what do they need, and what will be a good fit for them, and what will be a good fit for those families, and doing all of those assessments and working with the birth families and sometimes the other kinship relationships that there are to get a child to adoption. And I am super excited because in the midst of COVID, we were able to have one adoption go through of a little boy just a couple of weeks ago, which was done virtually. And we have another adoption that is going to go through, I believe it is this week coming, of actually a teenager, where we are extremely, extremely grateful because the courts are getting this done just before this child would turn of an age where the process would be stopped because he's an immigrant, and an immigration lawyer would have to then be involved, which then presses a reset button on the whole process and sends it backwards. And this young person has been waiting long enough for his forever home. Does that answer the question? And so there are a slew of other programs we do. So we are, unlike many organizations, we are not one thing. We pull together a range of services because we try to approach people holistically. We are an organization that our work really entirely centers around bringing about social justice by removing the barriers and obstacles that are posed socioeconomically and culturally for people. And additionally, we are very much in sync with VIM in that a lot of our work centers on and addresses the social determinants of health. And so having this range of services allows us to work with people as whole people and not in their pieces parts. So very often it's like, oh, no, we can't talk about that because, that's, it's like if you went in the grocery store and you wanted apples and they told you, I'm so sorry, we can only talk to you about our oranges. So we really try to work with people and do work with people as whole people and in whatever family unit as an entire family unit.
So how many people might work together from your agency and even beyond on a single case? I know in the disability world, often there's about 5 or 6 people helping one person with a disability with a number of services and issues and challenges, and that's just what it takes. In your world, what is the average, how many people are working to help one person on average?
I don't know that we can say that there is an average. It very much, it is about what does that particular individual need and want for themselves. And then it's about however many people it takes. And so really what we do is we don't, what we do is that there needs to be someone who walks with this person and supports them and helps them navigate whatever else it is that is in the way of them getting what it is that they need. And so there is always going to be one person that sticks with that individual. And so then they are never just sort of left alone to fend for themselves, no matter what other services they may need to receive, be it housing, be it food, be it medical services, be it mental health or substance abuse services. It really doesn't matter what else it is. Sometimes it's driving lessons, whatever else it is, that they have someone who walks with them.
So, and what do you call that person?
Really, we just call them by their names. There are, if you were to look at sort of the grants and the programs where we have to put labels and titles to things, there would be a range of those things depending on the title that is rendered in that particular model. The title is really immaterial. Sometimes it can be called a case manager. Sometimes it might be called an outreach specialist. It might be called a coordinator. It might be called a family support worker. So the label is far less important than what we are actually doing.
So it sounds like, though, that 18 Degrees is one of the larger employers in Berkshire County. Do you have issues staffing, as some other agencies in our county have, finding enough people to do all the work that needs to be done?
Hiring in the Berkshires is challenging. Hiring in human services is often challenging because, as we all know, similarly to the education field, that our folks are the backbone of communities and are woefully underpaid. And I will tell you, and I'm sure others would confirm, that were it not for our social services staff that the amount of pain and stress and illness and safety would be much more greatly compromised always, and certainly during a pandemic were it not for these employees. What we find and what we have focused on is one being the kind of place to work that you want to work. And so in our employee satisfaction and engagement survey, which, we didn't just set up a survey monkey, we did it proper. Our staff are incredibly mission driven. And we could see that, and then it was nice to have the data to validate that. And so, we know that we are pulling from the right pool of people. We recognize that we work with families in ways that facilitate them in accomplishing what they need to accomplish in their lives. And that similarly, we need to work with our staff in that way. That again, our staff are not pieces, parts, they're whole people. And so, there is a need for us to be flexible. There's a need for us to care about them, which is pretty easy to do, actually, because they're amazing and funny and smart and cool and creative and you name it. And we continue to work on our baseline pay rates. And so last year, we increased the baseline pay rates of our lowest paid staff, which are childcare workers, which you'll find is true across the state, and well ahead of the state's grand bargain, which would have folks waiting until 2023 to be at a minimum pay rate of $15 an hour, which we all know by 2023 will not have moved the needle at all for folks. We increased those base pay rates so that our child care staff were at that level and beyond. And so we have continued that trend with other programs, that we have a plan for increasing baseline pay rates. Our folks, as with many social services agencies, are often paid at a level where they need some of the very services that we provide. So there is quite a little conundrum in there that we may not be able to change the world all at once, but we can chip away at our corner of it. And so we work very hard at doing what's right. We also have our human resources team, which is 2 people. So it's not a huge team, but they work very hard. And then we do things like recognizing the skill base that is there, even if the formal certification or that formal experience wasn't there, recognizing that oftentimes women don't have the same opportunities for promotion that men do, recognizing that oftentimes people of color don't have the same, so they don't have the same shot at those credentials. And so we're looking at, yes, there are certain things that, you have to be a licensed social worker for, so of course, but we look at what is that raw material there? What is that light that they just need a shot at? And so we work at supporting that. For an example of that would be with our childcare staff. Having certified childcare staff has not actually been a requirement, but we wanted our staff to be certified in childcare. And they they weren't able to take the certification classes. They don't have devices other than a phone to do them remotely, and doing them at the end of a long day of providing childcare. So you get the idea. So we worked with BCC, and shout out to BCC, and brought the certification classes on site, and made sure that our staff could use our laptops or computers that we provided them with, and on work time.
So it sounds like you're bringing a lot of true leadership experience to this job, that you have a real kind of HR savvy. Tell us, what did you do before? Where did, and how lucky we were to get you, and where did you come from?
Oh, well, God bless you for the compliment. Oh gosh, my background is super varied, but I have had a lot of leadership experience, and that started really when I was like 16 years old. And so, fun fact, in one of my career incarnations, I was a professional dancer and choreographer. And when I was 16, I was a teacher teaching classes on my own at a very popular studio whose director was having great success in New York and across the country. And so at age 16, I found myself directing the dance program of this very popular studio. Fortunately, we had an adult administrator. And so I wasn't all on my own, but from that, I think I learned a whole lot about what to do and what not to do with working with people. And of course, as I continued through my career, I learned more. I spent I've spent a ton of time in social services and human services, in previous role working with people with an organization that served people with developmental, psychiatric, and physical disabilities in vocational and supported employment models of programming. I was heading insurance marketing for a branch agency of an Indianapolis-based organization at one time, and that was pretty funky. So I had a broker's license. I wasn't the seller of insurance, but you had to have one of those. And I've worked in membership development and strategy. I've been a consultant for about 7 years on projects ranging from a multi-year Amtrak contract nationwide to financial institutions in Connecticut, and also with not-for-profits. And so quite honestly, I've had this kind of alphabet soup of a career, and it took me a little minute to say, why am I not sitting in a single box? And what I came to recognize is that whatever my title may be in whatever organization I'm fortunate enough to get to contribute to, I'm a capacity builder. And I go where I feel I can contribute in that way. 18 degrees, I was not looking to come to the Berkshires or anywhere particularly, but I just, from the first phone conversation I had with the search committee, I just got this feeling that just kept growing, that I felt like I was meant to be here. And I love, love, love my agency and what we do and the people that I get to work with.
That's a good story. So are you actually living in the Berkshires now or near?
Not, I'm commuting.
From?
I'm commuting from Springfield. And so my intention was to move, and I thought, okay, you know, give me a little time to get settled, because, you know, taking on a big agency like this, you know, I need a little focus. And so I keep thinking the time will come when I'm busy enough to do things like put a house on a market and search and what have you. And then of course there were our sons who were like, please don't move until I graduate, and that sort of thing. So anyway, I have felt I feel like I've been adopted here, and in all the best ways of that. So I feel like I have two families.
I was going to say you're a Berkshire adoptee, so we'll take you.
I'm grateful for
and
it.
one day you will have time to think about where you want to live and what you want to do. But imagine that. Tell us. Well, first of all, we have one good question here, which is, how do you find people to help? Do they come to you directly, or do they get referred to you? How does that work exactly? And how do you know if you can help them? What is the process that tells you that this is someone that you should take on as a client and can help?
Great question. So folks come to us in all different ways. So a lot of people come to us by word of mouth from other people that they know. So we operate the Family Resource Center in Pittsfield, and our FRC here in small Pittsfield served the third highest number of people in the state of all FRCs. So that should tell you something about the power of the word of mouth, but also about the amazing staff we have and the way that they connect with folks. So folks may come by word of mouth. They may be referred to us by any other not-for-profit organization, by a hospital, by a doctor, by a nurse, from a behavioral health center. We have great relationships and collaborations. It's hard to think of who we don't partner with and collaborate with. And so we have great relationships with the school systems, and so we have people who are referred to us in those ways. And so there really isn't, as an agency, there isn't any one door that you must go through, which is part of the beauty of it.
So we would be remiss if we did not mention a program called Kids for Harmony. And I'm not sure if everyone is aware of Kids for Harmony. It's a wonderful program. And tell us just a little bit about what that program is and what its impact is on young musicians in our community. And I believe that there is something coming up for Kids for Harmony, if I'm not mistaken, a concert or something, virtual, of course. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, as always, you've got your finger on the pulse. Kids for Harmony is a free intensive classical music program of music with a social justice purpose. It's based on a model from Venezuela called El Sistema. And it is really about the fact that classical music has belonged to the wealthy and privileged. And so the model is really simple. Well, what if it's not? And what does that then do? Our program, Kids for Harmony, is the only such program in the United States that is embedded within a social services agency. I can't take credit for that. Our former CEO here, Carolyn Burns, was the person who pulled all this together and initiated it with really great vision. And so we work with children starting from when they're in second or third grade, and we are with them all the way through to their adulthood. And it is, our program is based on 3 cornerstones, musical excellence being one. So it is about what does that discipline, that drive, that achievement do for that child and the way they see themselves, think about themselves and their lives. What doors does it open for them in worlds that they might not otherwise have even been able to visit? And what does that child's achievement, accomplishment, and growth do in terms of the whole family's vision of themselves and what their children can achieve? The second cornerstone is that individual child's well-being and development. Again, we're about the whole person. And so we don't just do music lessons. We care about and support them in what they're doing academically, in whatever is happening in their lives. And we have a family liaison, 2 of them actually, one in North Adams and one in Pittsfield, who is there to support both the child and the entire family, along with our very skilled teaching artists who know music beautifully. I live in fear that somebody's going to try to steal them away because they are amazing musicians, but they are trauma informed, and they understand systemic barriers like racism and so forth. So this team, and then our third cornerstone is family support. We support the entire family, that a child cannot participate in a program that requires this level of rigor and intensiveness if their family doesn't have the support they need, if you're working 2 or 3 jobs, if your health isn't good, if you're struggling with another child in the family who has special needs, or if that child who's in our program has special needs. So whatever it is, we work with the entire family, and we work to bring that family more deeply connected to other families in Kids for Harmony, but with others in the community, so that they are enriched by those additional relationships, and the community is enriched by having them actively engaged. Coming up on July 27th at 7 p.m. is our first ever virtual gala. Did we know how to put on a virtual gala before now? No, we did not. But we are, we're can-do people. And the gala is important for us. Kids for Harmony is not a program that is funded by a government contract other than a very small Mass Cultural Council grant that we have. And so we have to raise every dollar for that program. It is well worth the effort. We have 62 students in Pittsfield and North Adams. And we are committed to adding a new cohort of students each year so that we're reaching more children. I'm proud to say that we had our first high school graduate, so our first child who was old enough to graduate from high school last year, and he, Johan, went on to MCLA, and we have now a group of several who are juniors this year, and it is from amongst those ranks that we have teaching assistants in the program. So these are paid teaching assistants, because the level that they have accomplished in terms of musicianship but also the model of how to teach and encourage is such that during this pandemic, we couldn't do our normal rehearsing as an ensemble at Brayton Elementary or over at Morningside. They were shut down, and we couldn't be together. So we have continued lessons virtually over FaceTime, Zoom, and whatever the heck else we could find to do it. And our teaching assistants are leading classes on their own with those students preparing lessons. Yes, of course, they have support from the director, but it's them and those kids, and they are, I mean, one of our directors said they can control and manage a class better than they can. It is quite something to see. We have some videos. I'll share them. I'll send you a link.
Please do. That would be great. I have heard Kids for Harmony at several events, and it is my deep desire at the next, whenever we can have the Berkshire Nonprofit Awards in person, for Kids for Harmony to play at that, although I don't know if that will be possible because it's usually a Tuesday morning when they're all in school, but we'll work on that. If nothing else, we can call video.
Yes, please do join us for the gala, though. If you need to have your heart lifted, if you just want to have some fun, there is everything about seeing and listening and hearing from them. That'll do it for you.
Yep, that's pretty much the medicine that we need. So one last question, because we are nearing our time here. Do you use volunteers at 18 Degrees?
We certainly do. We work with about 100 volunteers and growing, and we have been steadily growing that number over the time since I've been here. Volunteers are hugely important to us. A huge area is in mentoring in our youth development programs, and boy, do we have some amazing volunteers. And something that happened during COVID was we got a call from a mom with one of our youth who was running away. The whole COVID thing was just too much on top of sort of other challenges. And so that mom reached out to us to say, obviously we were social distancing. Yes, he's talked his mentor. The only person he'll listen to is his mentor. Can we get the mentor in there? And so bringing together that mentor with that child is what made all of the difference. So that's just a single example of the impact of mentors. We have folks who are court-appointed special advocates, and so CASA volunteers, and two new ones were just sworn in just yesterday in Judge McMenemy's, well, not in the office, but virtually with Judge McMenemy. And that's another amazing way to volunteer. And of course, in our Family Resource Center with events, in our childcare centers, that's an amazing thing. And I know one of your questions had been, what do we need? Certainly we need volunteers and mentors. Donors always, of course. One of the things we really, really need and really ask is that we need for us all to not judge people. Let's judge systems, let's judge policies and make those better. But a lot of the barriers that people encounter are the barriers around judgment.
Colleen, I know that you wrote a beautiful letter in response to the Black Lives Matter movement. Are there other of your writings about this topic that you were just talking about, this systemic barriers that affect all of your families and children? Is some of your writing or your letters or a blog, is there any of that on your website? Because I think you're a very good writer
Oh, thank you.
Among many other things, your letter was the one of the many articles that I read that touched me the most. And I imagine, I'm just wondering, are there other writings that we can find in your experience with these systemic issues that we have that are at the forefront of our news right now?
More to come. I try not to, on our website are many voices. And so I can certainly connect with some more, and we can post some more on our website. Yes, it is one of the things that we have been doing more of, because advocating, championing people who are not at the tables where decisions are being made about their lives is a huge part of our mission and vision as an organization. So, you know, Erin, I'll tell her you want more.
Well, thank you so much for telling us more about the work that 18 Degrees does. And I've certainly enjoyed learning a bit more about you and what you bring to it. And it sounds like it's going well, and I'm sure there are many, many challenges, but I feel that I would enjoy working there based on how thoughtful you are about the processes. It's a big organization. It's a huge job. So thank you for what you do. And I'm always thinking that that's the best part about my job, is that I just get to speak to people who are so dedicated and doing such great work under extraordinary circumstances. And I am always so appreciative of that, and you all are inspiring to me. So thank you so much. And I guess, Megan, I'm going to hand it over to you to wrap us up. Or Steve.
Liana, thank you, and thank everybody for coming today. We appreciate. Here's Megan now. She could finish. Go ahead, Megan.
Oh, well, Steve,
I was
go
just
ahead.
thanking everybody. That's all.
Thank you, Ilana. Thank you, Colleen. Thank you, Ilana, Liana, and so much for your time and for the good work you do in our community. And Liana, who will be our guest next week? Can you remind me? I will send the full list out to everybody as well.
I have a piece of paper here that tells me that. So next week, we have CHP and the Breen Center. And I actually am going to be away. So we have Erica Allison as your moderator, and she's fantastic and vibrant and fun. And so I'm leaving you in very good hands. And then the following week after that is Berkshire Center for Justice and Berkshire Immigrant Center.
Great, thank you so much, Liana. And we will send links to Vim and 18 Degrees in an email to everyone as well, so you can take a deep dive into the wonderful work that they do in our community. So thanks again, everyone, and goodbye. See you next time.
Bye.